He wasn't supposed to stay. At least, that's what I told myself when my childhood friend from the countryside showed up at my door with nothing but a worn-out backpack and a nervous smile. The city was too much for him, he said, and he just needed a place to crash until he found his footing. I didn't expect to let him stay more than a few days. But days turned into weeks, and the more time we spent together, the harder it became to ignore what was changing between us. It all felt harmless at first, sharing meals, late-night talks, laughing about the past. But one night when the walls between friendship and something else started to blur, I realized I wasn't ready for what might happen next. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This story will take you to a place where friendship, doubt, and desire collide, and the ending might leave you breathless. When I opened the door that evening, I didn't expect to see Daniel standing there. It had been years since we last spoke beyond the occasional text. He looked older now, more defined, but still carried the same quiet simplicity I remembered from summers spent back in my grandparents' small town. "Hey," he said, shifting awkwardly with a worn backpack over his shoulder. I didn't know who else to call. The city lights cast shadows across his face, but I could see the exhaustion in his eyes. I stepped aside, motioning him in. "Of course, man. Come in. What's going on?" He dropped the bag on the floor with a sigh. "I thought I could handle the city. I was wrong. It's too much. The job I came for fell through, rent's impossible, and..." He hesitated, lowering his voice. "I just need somewhere to stay until I figure things out." I studied him, remembering the boy who once helped me fix a broken bike in the middle of a dirt road, the one who used to share his lunch with me at the creek. He looked out of place here in my apartment, surrounded by modern furniture and the endless hum of traffic outside the window. "Stay as long as you need," I said finally. "It's not a problem." His shoulders relaxed, and for the first time since arriving, he smiled. "Thanks. I owe you." That night, we ate takeout on the couch, laughing about small-town memories and marveling at how different our lives had become. He told me how the city had swallowed him whole, job interviews that went nowhere, roommates who vanished when rent was due, nights spent wondering if he'd made a huge mistake leaving home. "I thought coming here would prove something," he admitted, staring into his carton of noodles. "That I could be more than just the guy who stayed behind." "You're already more than that," I said without thinking. His eyes flicked up to mine, and for a moment, the air between us shifted. I quickly looked away, pretending to focus on the TV. The days that followed slipped into a rhythm. Daniel woke early, making coffee before I even rolled out of bed. He cooked dinners with the same patience he once used to build campfires by the lake. My apartment, usually so quiet, now buzzed with his presence. One night, after a long day at work, I came home to find him sitting on the balcony, gazing at the city lights. He didn't hear me at first. His profile was sharp against the glow of skyscrapers in the distance, and something about the way he sat there, calm, almost vulnerable, made my chest tighten. "Deep in thought?" I asked. He turned, startled, then smiled faintly. "Just wondering if I belong here. Everything moves so fast. Back home, you can hear your own thoughts. Here, it feels like they drown in the noise." I leaned on the railing beside him. "Maybe you're not supposed to fit in. Maybe you're supposed to change it a little." He laughed quietly. Always the optimistic one. Then, more softly, "I don't know what I'd do without you right now." The words lingered, heavy and unspoken. I nodded, unsure of what to say. But inside, I felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the night air. Over the next week, our lives intertwined even more. He tagged along when I ran errands, helped fix a leaking faucet, and even started joining me at the gym. Every small thing he did felt strangely intimate. The way he tossed me a towel after a workout, the way his arm brushed mine when we sat too close on the couch. I tried to ignore it. He was my friend, someone I'd known for years. But late at night, lying awake while he slept just a few feet away in the guest room, my mind wandered to places I wasn't ready to admit. One Friday, we ordered pizza and watched a movie. Halfway through, the power went out, plunging the apartment into darkness. Daniel laughed, lighting a candle he'd found in the kitchen. We sat on the floor, the flickering glow casting shadows across his face. This reminds me of when the power went out back home, he said. We'd sit around telling stories until it came back on. I nodded, memories flooding back. Yeah. You always had the best stories. He leaned closer, his face illuminated by the candlelight. Do you ever miss it? The simplicity? Every day, I admitted. But then I remember why I left. I wanted more. I wanted to see if I could handle it. And did you? I hesitated, then met his eyes. I thought I did. Until you showed up. The room went silent. His expression softened, his lips parting like he wanted to ask something but didn't. The candle flickered between us, and I felt my heartbeat pound in my ears. Before either of us could say more, the power returned, flooding the room with harsh light. We both blinked, pulling back as if nothing had happened. Daniel cleared his throat, standing quickly. I'm going to bed. Long day tomorrow. I watched him disappear into the guest room, my chest tight with words I couldn't say. Lying awake that night, I realized the truth I'd been avoiding. Something was building between us, something fragile and dangerous. And sooner or later, one of us would have to face it. The next morning felt strangely heavy. Daniel moved around the apartment like nothing had happened the night before, making coffee, frying eggs, humming an old country tune under his breath. But I couldn't stop replaying that moment in the candlelight, how close we'd been, how easily the silence could have broken in a completely different way. Coffee? He asked, sliding a steaming mug toward me at the table. His eyes didn't quite meet mine. Thanks, I said, wrapping my hands around the mug. The warmth seeped into my palms, but it did nothing to ease the tightness in my chest. We ate breakfast in awkward quiet, and when I finally left for work, I couldn't help glancing back at him. He stood in the doorway, barefoot, sunlight hitting his shoulders. He raised his hand in a casual wave, but something about the way he looked at me lingered long after I drove away. All day, I was distracted. My coworkers joked that I seemed far away, and they weren't wrong. Every delivery, every errand, every task was done on autopilot. My thoughts were back in that apartment, circling around Daniel. When I came home that evening, he was on the couch with his backpack open, clothes folded neatly inside. My stomach dropped. You're leaving? I asked, shutting the door behind me. He looked up, startled. No, not yet. I was just organizing. He paused, then sighed. I don't want to overstay my welcome. You're not overstaying, I said quickly. I like having you here. The words hung between us. His expression shifted, as though he wanted to believe me but wasn't sure if he could. That night, after dinner, we ended up on the balcony again. The city stretched out below, glowing in 1,000 points of light. Daniel leaned on the railing, his arms bare in the warm night air. You ever wonder if you made the right choices? He asked suddenly. I frowned. What do you mean? Leaving home. Chasing something bigger. Thinking it would make you happier. I came here because I thought the city would fix everything. But maybe I just don't belong. I studied him carefully. Maybe belonging isn't about the place. Maybe it's about who you're with. His head turned slowly, his eyes finding mine in the dim light. My breath caught. I wanted to step closer, close the distance, but my feet stayed rooted. Then his phone buzzed, breaking the moment. He pulled it from his pocket, read the message, and his face hardened. Who was it? I asked. Just someone from home, he muttered, shoving the phone away. But his voice had a sharp edge, and I knew it wasn't just anyone. Daniel? He shook his head. It's nothing. Forget it. But I couldn't forget. The rest of the night, he seemed distant, retreating into himself. He went to bed early, leaving me alone with questions I couldn't answer. The next day, while he was in the shower, his phone buzzed again on the counter. I didn't mean to look, but the screen lit up with a name I recognized from years ago. Mark, one of the guys we grew up with. A simple message glowed on the screen. You don't belong there. Come home. I stepped back quickly as Daniel came out of the bathroom, towel around his waist. His eyes flicked to the phone, then to me. His face tightened. You saw it, he said flatly. I didn't mean to. It doesn't matter. He grabbed the phone, his hands trembling slightly. They think I'm crazy for coming here. For trying to make something of myself. They'll never understand. His voice cracked, and for the first time, I saw how much weight he carried. Not just the struggle of the city, but the burden of expectations, of people telling him who he was supposed to be. Without thinking, I reached out and touched his arm. You don't have to prove anything to them. You're not alone anymore. Not here. He froze, looking down at my hand, then back up at me. His eyes softened, but fear still lingered in them. You don't know what you're saying, he whispered. Yes, I do, I said firmly. I know what I feel when I'm around you. And I think you feel it too. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then, slowly, he pulled his arm back, stepping away. Even if I did, it's not that simple. The words hit like a blade, sharp and cold. I wanted to argue, to demand why, but instead I let the silence stretch. That night, I lay awake, listening to the faint sound of him turning in the next room. My chest ached with everything unsaid. Just when I thought sleep might finally come, I heard a soft knock at my door. I sat up. Daniel? He stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the hall light. His voice was quiet, trembling. Can I come in? My heart pounded as I nodded. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. And in that moment, I knew the distance between us was about to vanish, but whether it would bring us closer or break us apart, I didn't know. When Daniel closed the door behind him, the room felt smaller, the air heavier. He stood there in the half-darkness, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, like he wasn't sure what he was doing. I sat on the edge of the bed, my heart thundering so loudly I was sure he could hear it. Couldn't sleep? I asked, my voice softer than I intended. He shook his head. No. I couldn't stop thinking. His eyes darted toward me, then away. About everything. I swallowed. Daniel, you don't have to. Yes, I do, he interrupted, his voice firm for once. He took a deep breath and crossed the room, sitting down on the chair in the corner. All my life, I've been told who to be. Back home, they had this picture of me, hardworking, quiet, the guy who never caused trouble. But that's not me. Not all of me. His words echoed in the silence, raw and vulnerable. And now? I asked gently. Now I'm here, in this city that doesn't care if I stay or leave. And I'm in this apartment with you, feeling things I can't explain, things I shouldn't. His voice cracked, and he rubbed his face with both hands. And I don't know what scares me more, admitting it or losing it before it even begins. My chest tightened. I moved from the bed to the floor, sitting cross-legged in front of him. Daniel, you don't have to pretend with me. Not here. Not now. His hands dropped, and he looked at me with eyes so full of conflict it hurt to see. Then, slowly he reached forward, his fingers brushing mine. The touch was hesitant, trembling. But it was real. I held his hand, neither of us speaking. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was charged, alive, like the moment right before a storm breaks. Then, suddenly, a loud crash from the street below jolted us. A car alarm blared, headlights flashing through the window. We both flinched, pulling apart instinctively. The outside world had crashed in, reminding us that this fragile moment wasn't safe, not yet. Daniel stood abruptly. I should go back to my room, he muttered, already moving toward the door. Daniel, wait. I stood too, my hand catching his wrist. He stopped, frozen, his back still to me. If you walk out now, we'll keep dancing around this forever. And I can't do that anymore. Slowly he turned. His face was tense, but his eyes were softer, glistening. Do you think I want to walk away? I don't. But you don't understand what it's like to come from a place where people judge you for less than this. If they knew. I don't care what they think, I said, stepping closer. What matters is what's happening right here between us. For a heartbeat, he just stared at me. Then, almost like gravity pulled him, he leaned in. Our foreheads touched, his breath uneven against mine. I'm terrified, he whispered. Me too, I admitted. And then he kissed me. It wasn't careful or restrained. It was messy, desperate, filled with all the words we hadn't dared to say. My hands gripped his shoulders, his fingers tangled in my shirt, and for a moment the rest of the world didn't exist. When we finally pulled apart, both of us were breathless, staring at each other as if to ask, Did that really just happen? But before either of us could speak, his phone buzzed again on the nightstand. The name flashed across the screen, Mark. Daniel's face hardened. He picked it up, silenced it, and threw it face down. Still him? I asked carefully. He nodded. He doesn't stop. He thinks he knows what's best for me. He thinks he owns the right to decide where I belong. Then don't let him, I said firmly. Daniel looked at me, torn between fear and determination. You make it sound so easy. It's not easy, I said. But maybe it's worth it. The silence stretched again, filled with the storm inside us. He sat back down, burying his face in his hands. I sat beside him, not touching, but close enough that he could feel I wasn't going anywhere. Finally he spoke. I don't know what happens next. I don't even know if I'm strong enough for this. You don't have to know everything right now, I said softly. All you have to know is what you want tonight. With me. His hands dropped slowly, his eyes locking onto mine. For the first time, the fear wasn't the loudest thing in them. There was something else now, something stronger. He leaned closer again, his voice steady. Then I want this. I want you. And as his lips met mine once more, I realized this wasn't just a fleeting moment, a mistake we'd laugh about later. This was the beginning of something neither of us could take back. Still, deep down, I knew the hardest part wasn't the kiss, or the fear, or even Mark's constant messages. The hardest part was what came after, when we'd have to decide whether this fragile connection could survive the weight of the world outside. And that question lingered like thunder on the horizon, promising a storm we couldn't avoid. The days after that night felt different. Every glance between Daniel and me carried a weight we hadn't dared acknowledge before. He moved around the apartment with a kind of cautious awareness, like every step might reveal too much. I caught myself watching him, when he poured coffee, when he stretched after waking, when he hummed softly while washing dishes. But with the warmth came something else, tension. We hadn't talked about the kiss. Not once. On Tuesday evening, I came home late from work and found him pacing in the living room. His phone lay on the table, screen cracked from being slammed down. His face was pale, jaw tight. What happened? I asked carefully. He ran a hand through his hair. He called again. Said he heard rumors. That people back home are talking. I frowned. Talking about what? He looked at me, eyes filled with something between fear and shame. About me. About why I left. About who I'm staying with. The weight of his words hit hard. They don't know anything. That doesn't matter, he said bitterly. Back there, rumors are enough. Once people start whispering, it spreads like wildfire. I stepped closer. Daniel, you came here to find your own life. Not to let them control you from miles away. He shook his head, frustration boiling over. Easy for you to say. You didn't grow up with their eyes on you, waiting for you to slip. If they knew what happened between us. He stopped abruptly, biting down on his words. The silence that followed was suffocating. I finally asked the question I'd been avoiding. Are you ashamed of what happened between us? His face softened instantly. No, he said, his voice quiet but firm. That's the only thing I'm sure about. I just don't know if I'm strong enough to face everything else that comes with it. I wanted to tell him strength didn't matter, that what we had was enough. But even I wasn't sure if that was true. The next morning, an unexpected knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. Daniel was still asleep, so I answered. A man in a work uniform stood there, holding an envelope. Delivery for Daniel Thompson. I froze. Here. Yep, the man said, handing it over before walking away. When Daniel emerged, rubbing his eyes, I handed him the envelope. He stared at the return address, his face draining of color. It's from Mark, he muttered. He tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The words were scrawled in messy handwriting, but the message was clear. Everyone knows. If you don't come back and explain yourself, they'll never forgive you. Daniel dropped the paper as if it burned him. Daniel, I said, grabbing his arm. You don't owe them anything. Not explanations, not apologies. Nothing. He looked at me, torn apart inside. You don't understand. They're my family, my neighbors. The people who raised me. If they turn their backs on me, I have nowhere to go. You have here, I said firmly. The air between us pulsed with intensity, but before he could respond, his phone rang again. This time he answered, pacing the room. His voice rose and fell as he argued with whoever was on the other end. I caught fragments. Not your business. I'm not the same person anymore. Stop controlling me. Finally, he hung up and slammed the phone onto the table. He stood there, shaking, tears in his eyes. I can't keep living like this, he whispered, trapped between what they want and what I feel. I walked up and placed my hands on his shoulders. Then stop. Choose yourself. Choose what's real right here, right now. His eyes searched mine, desperate and afraid. For a long moment, it felt like the world held its breath. And then, for the second time, he kissed me. But this kiss was different, not desperate, not messy. It was steady, determined, like he was finally claiming something that belonged to him. When we pulled apart, his forehead rested against mine. I don't know what's going to happen, he admitted. But I know I don't want to lose this. Not you. My chest tightened and I whispered, then don't. But even in that moment of closeness, I knew the storm wasn't over. His world and mine had just collided, and the fallout was coming. The whispers from back home, the pressure from people who thought they knew what was best, none of it would disappear just because we had chosen each other in that living room. That night, as Daniel finally fell asleep on the couch beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. My hand brushed against his, and I held on tightly, refusing to let go. Because deep down, I knew the next step wouldn't be just about us. It would be about whether Daniel could stand against everything he'd run from, and whether I was strong enough to stand with him. The question burned in my chest, unspoken but inescapable. When the world pushes back, will he still choose me? The days after Daniel confronted Mark's words were a blur of tension and quiet moments that felt like stolen treasures. He stayed close to me, cooking breakfast in the mornings, leaving his jacket on the back of my chair, brushing past me in the narrow kitchen with a touch that lingered too long. On the surface, we acted like nothing had changed, but in every glance, every pause, we both knew the truth. We were no longer two friends hiding behind excuses. Yet the outside world hadn't gone away. His phone still buzzed, though he answered less and less. Messages piled up, missed calls from people who wanted him to return, to explain himself, to set the record straight. And every time he ignored them, I saw the weight pressing harder on his shoulders. One evening, I found him standing on the balcony, staring at the glowing skyline, his knuckles white around his phone. He didn't turn when I stepped outside. They won't stop, he said quietly. They won't let me live in peace unless I go back and face them. I felt a pang of fear. Are you saying you're leaving? He shook his head. Not to go back. Not like that. I don't want to spend my life running. I want to stand in who I am. For once. I moved closer, resting my hand on his arm. Then do it here. You don't owe them a return. You owe yourself honesty. His eyes met mine, and in them, I saw the decision forming, the fear melting into something sharper, stronger. The very next day, he told me he wanted to go out, not just anywhere, but somewhere public. No hiding, he said simply. We ended up at a small cafe in the city center, a place buzzing with chatter and clinking cups. It felt like neutral ground, a space filled with strangers who didn't know us. Daniel sat across from me, sipping his coffee, his hands trembling slightly. I've never done this before, he admitted. Sat across from another man feeling like this. I reached across the table, my fingers brushing his. He stiffened at first, glancing around, but then he let his hands stay under mine. His shoulders loosened, and he gave me the smallest, most genuine smile I'd seen since he arrived. That moment should have been simple, but it wasn't, because at the next table over, someone snapped a photo. I didn't notice at first, but Daniel did. His face paled. He knew what it meant. Daniel? I asked, following his gaze. They'll know, he whispered. If that photo gets out, everyone back home will know. Panic rose in me, but before I could speak, he straightened. His voice steadied. Let them. The word stunned me. His hand tightened around mine, not hiding, not pulling back. For the first time, he wasn't afraid. Later that evening, when we returned to the apartment, his phone lit up with messages. The photo had made its way online. A blurry shot of us at the cafe, our hands touching across the table. His screen filled with accusations, warnings, pleas. He looked at me, eyes burning. This is it. No turning back. Do you regret it? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He shook his head firmly. No. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm not pretending. We sat together in the quiet, the world pressing against the walls of that small apartment, but inside, there was peace. Daniel leaned into me, his head resting on my shoulder. You saved me, he said softly. Not from them. From myself. From the lies I kept telling. I wrapped my arm around him, holding him close. You did that yourself. You just needed someone to remind you that you deserved it. The next days weren't easy. His family called, his friends sent long messages, some full of anger, others full of confusion. But Daniel didn't waver. He answered a few calmly, telling them the truth, that he had found someone in the city, that he wasn't ashamed. Some hung up on him, others cried. He stood through all of it. And I stood with him. Weeks later, we walked together through a crowded park, the city alive around us. People passed by, some glancing, some not caring at all. Daniel's hand slipped into mine, not hidden, not afraid. This is what I wanted, he said quietly. Not the city, not the noise. Just the chance to be myself. And with you, I finally can. I squeezed his hand, my chest full of something deeper than words. Then let's build from here. No running. No hiding. Just us. He smiled, and in that moment, I knew that all the storms, all the fear, all the whispers from the past were worth it. Because he had chosen this. Chosen me. Chosen himself. And maybe that was the real surprise of it all, that the boy who came from the countryside looking lost had found his place in the chaos of the city. Not in the skyscrapers or the streets, but here, beside me. If this story touched you, think about the moments in your own life where fear tried to silence your truth. What would it mean to stop running and finally choose yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss another story of love, courage, and transformation.